And we're live, back again. This is Lit Literature. This is your host, the Demon, aka JP. And we have a small crew today to talk about a very special, creepy book. And with us today, we've got the Captain.
The Captain. I'm over here with my new friend that I made here. His name is Victor. And we will both be going for a jog across University campus right after the podcast. So I'm totally excited about that.
And the director.
And we got Brett, the director. I'm excited for this. I was excited for this book because I don't have much experience with Stephen King, even though he's considered like one of the best authors ever, or one of the most popular. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
And if you haven't figured it out yet, folks, we are going to be discussing the Pet Sematary today. I was pumped about this because I'm a Stephen King fan, and I have read a lot of his work, but not all of them. I mean, there's a shit ton, so... Yeah. I guess I can't be blamed for that, but I was excited to dive into it, and I specifically wanted to audiobook it. The Audible released a special edition with Michael C. Hall as the narrator, so I was pumped about that.
Side note, if anybody from Audible's listening, we are looking for sponsorships.
Yeah.
So wink, wink. Nudge, nudge.
Wink, wink. So I think, man, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. I think none of us, I didn't watch the movie. Did you watch the old movie?
I did not. It's probably one of the only Stephen King movies that I haven't
Yeah, I know,
seen.
right?
Yeah.
Captain, did you have a chance to watch a movie?
I blitzed through it really quickly.
All right. So here's what I think we're going to do. Let's focus primarily on the book today.
Yeah.
And then maybe a little bit later on, when we're
revisit.
catching up on another book series or something like that, and we need a spacer, we'll totally just watch the film. And then, folks, we will join you for a Pet Sematary Round 2, where we discuss the old film as well.
The old film.
I heard
They'll
that
probably
they might,
remake it at some point
I
anyway.
actually heard
soon.
they might be remaking it, so
Yeah.
we might have the opportunity to do an old film, new film / book. You know, we'll get back into it.
Right.
Anyway, why waste any more time? Let's jump into it.
All right.
My initial feelings are I actually really liked the book, and talk about a slow burn.
Yeah.
Actually, I can't even describe it. It's more like the last 3 hours of the audiobook is where anything crazy is happening. Not that stuff doesn't kind of crazily happen in the beginning,
Right.
but it's really more of a character dynamic. And it feels like it should be boring, but it's not.
Yeah. Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's just super interesting.
I always thought I thought while I was reading it how, like, you know, you always hear writers talk about how characters first, characters king, characters first. And, like, this book really drives that home because almost nothing happens but character in, like, the first 3/4 of it. And yet there wasn't 1 second where I was just like, ugh. I was always like, what next? You know, even though it was all character almost.
I also, you audiobooked it right too, director. Dross, did you read?
No, I actually did the
Manual
exact
copy?
same audiobook you guys did with Michael C. Hall.
Awesome.
Nice.
So I gotta say, and you guys tell me this, but I absolutely love the foreword that Stephen King wrote for it. I think it was republished in the previous print version that they had, but very cool to understand the inspiration for the book.
Right.
And how straight up real it was.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder Stephen King, when he's asked, what does he believe his scariest work is, and he thinks Pet Sematary.
So now, just in
time.
case anybody listening doesn't have an edition that has that quick forward, do you want to do a real quick summary of
let's
it?
do it. So, chime in, guys, because I may miss details, but basically, Stephen King, he moved. Well, he lived in Maine, but anyway, he was back out on the east coast of Maine, taking a temporary teaching, like kind of an honorary teaching position at a college.
Yeah, the University of Maine.
Thank you, sir. University of Maine. That's easy.
How did you ever remember that?
And obviously, if you know Stephen King, a lot of his works take place in Maine because that's where, you know, he grew up. And it was really cool because he describes it. They rented a big house, but it had this road across it that would just eat up animals. And he would write. Often he would go across the street to this gas station and write in this little back room of the gas station. And the owner talked with Judd's written accent, which kind of inspired that. And even the line the Rudd uses up a lot of them pets or animals.
whatever. Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. I'm just totally pulling it out of memory. So.
Right.
Yeah, no, terrible quoter. Terrible quoter I am, yes. But anyway, so his daughter's cat gets hit, and that inspired some of Ellie's lines, specifically. A really famous one, which was God could have his own cat.
Right.
The name on the gravestone in the Pet Sematary spelled the exact same way. There was a real pet cemetery in that area in the woods. And his son started to run as a truck was coming across the road. And to this day, Stephen King says that he still doesn't remember if his son fell or he caught him. And so all of those circumstances kind of combined together while he was writing in the back corner of that gas station across the street.
I have to say that, like, hearing that little intro part when I was listening to it, I didn't really think about it while I was listening to it, because then I just continued on with the story after that. But when I was actually out for a walk, not listening to anything at one point, I kind of thought back to that moment, and I was just like, man, how, like, if you put yourself in that situation and, like, the aftermath of dealing with it, like, in the moment you may not have thought about all the potential consequences, but the aftermath of it, and then not even knowing if your son tripped, like, feeling like, wow, future me, my current me, has such little control over what happened. You know, like, no matter how much I analyze it, if he would have kept running and got hit, like, I don't know if I could have done anything different, because I can't even remember back.
If I got him,
I can't even
right,
remember
yeah.
if I grabbed him or if he fell. Was it luck or was it me being vigilant? Like, to feel so
Powerless.
helpless would just be terrible.
And that's what filtered into the book, because he really viewed this book as a what if.
Yeah.
And then that's why I feel that Lewis may have a little bit, and not probably more than a little bit, of King himself in him.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. And now all characters have a little of their writer in them, of course, as, you know, they're imagined from the writer. But that's why he views this as the scariest book that he's written.
That's why a lot of people don't know, but I actually wrote all of the lines for Tyrion in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. They basically just copied that.
In fact, most of the real events that happened to Tyrion Lannister have, in fact, happened to Brett the director as well. So they just, they kind of coincided a little bit.
Except no hookers.
Right.
Ever.
He's clean.
Not my thing.
That's one of the add-ins. They're like, oh, Brett the director, he's so fun, we should make him a character, but he's just not exciting enough. He needs more hookers.
No, but that's definitely accurate, Demon. I definitely got the sense that Stephen King was himself a little bit of Lewis Creed. And I think that the whole reason there's that other friend character who's thrown in at the end, who's also named Steve, is also like maybe Stephen King trying to put himself in the body of a bystander, saying like, oh no, like I saw all these terrible things happen. Maybe that version is actually me, whereas the main character could also have potentially have been him. So it's kind of just a neat little trick that King plays at the end.
Yeah.
So, something cool, before we get into the deep in the dark, I figure let's talk a little bit about the characters themselves.
Yeah.
So, I actually really liked them, and I thought it was a really interesting dynamic, because, was it Lori? Was the wife's
Rachel.
name? What was the wife's name?
Rachel.
Sorry. Why did I pull Lori out of something?
Walking Dead.
Yeah, there we go. She's a wife, and there's all kinds of dead things walking around. Anyway, so Rachel, I thought was super interesting because in the beginning, In the beginning of the book, you're reading from Lewis' perspective all the time, and Rachel seems cool, but you kind of get this annoyed vibe with her at certain times. You're like, why the hell can't she get this? She's overreacting. Like, for example, in the argument about Ellie's and death.
Right.
The first conversation, argument, so to speak, that Lewis and Rachel have.
Yeah, she takes.
How could you be that way?
Yeah, Rachel takes a very sheltering approach to the whole topic of death. And this was one thing that I wanted to talk about, was that the whole book of Pet Sematary really, really intimately deals with the theme of thanatophobia, which is the fear of death. That theme is explored so closely and so uncomfortably throughout this entire novel. That's something that I'm a big. You guys both know that I'm a big horror fan, and that's a theme that always is touched upon in horror stories. But in Pet Sematary specifically, that theme is like King takes that theme to bed, sleeps with it, marries with it, has kids with it, like lives a full life with it. He really delves deep into that theme of the fear of death. And Rachel kind of embodies the extreme fear of death where she doesn't even want to deal with it. She wants to completely shield her children from death. She doesn't want anything to do with it. And we can kind of go into that a little bit more lately because her sister gets tied in with that theme.
To interject before we go further with it, that's what I thought was so awesome, because at first you're reading it and you're just on the surface.
Right.
So you get the feeling like, something happened, but she's just crazy. She's overreacting, and that's bullshit. You know, her husband's a doctor. He's dealing with this shit all the time. And then when you get to the point, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, whether we talk about it now or later is fine, but when you actually come to understand, I was just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, how deep can you get? You skirt on it, you make us kind of have a certain feeling, and then you finally get to this point where you can reveal that stuff, and I was just, he couldn't have done it in a better way. Like, I just felt so...
It definitely brings us to a thing that you will probably hear me say once every book or once every other book, because it's something I truly believe in, is the idea of usually when you're judging somebody, when you're saying that they are too much this, they are too much that, they are reacting too much this, it's usually, I'd say more times than not, just because you don't fully understand the story yet.
The lens.
You don't know the lens yet.
Yeah.
Right.
And even though you still may not agree with it, at least you can be like, oh, okay, I get that.
And I gotta say, King, the way that he opened that door was awesome. So, and that, I don't know what he was thinking about when he came up with that story of Zelda, but holy hell, that was just like, shiesty.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is getting off topic or not. It's still kind of talking about how the characters deal with death and stuff like that. Sure. But I actually thought it was kind of interesting how Lewis, the doctor, the husband.
Yeah, Lewis.
I think it's funny how he is a lot more like her than he thinks, in the sense that he keeps saying about how, like, oh, it's a natural part of life. It's a natural part of life. You can't shelter her forever. But then as soon as he actually has to deal with it, which is the death of Church, he covers it up. He tries to cover it up, and he does something quite disgusting to cover it up, which is bring his cat up to this place that he kind of has an idea that something is wrong with it.
In his defense, I'll say that he's thinking about, it's kind of like there's a little bit of a magic around there.
Yeah.
And it starts to like hint at it, but you don't really know that it's hinting at it.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling that King did such a good job with this like hidden pull on this in the mind of Lewis. You don't notice it. It's just Lewis is like, I guess I could just go bury it and she won't even know. He'll just have disappeared. And he's like joking about it in his mind. And then at that moment, he's like, I finally felt like this is home. In this moment, I felt like this is all home. He's kind of hinting at this kind of magic here. And Judd is there, and he's obviously feeling the pull too, but you don't get that. And so in his defense there, you could almost say like, well, he didn't really know where Judd was taking him.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? We're going to go bury this cat up here. Yeah. We're doing it now. But the pull of what they were doing just felt natural to them. And King does a great job of just hiding that in that scene, because he hides it in a way that you think it's just, I mean, if it were me and there was no magic, I would probably follow Judd out of straight up curiosity.
Right, yeah.
I mean, like, what the hell? What do you mean we're going to go bury this thing?
Yeah.
Now? Where are we going? Will you get a shovel? It's night. What do we... I'm not going to go do that. But then I'm thinking, where the fuck is Judd taking me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow him.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I might be a little different. I might be like, I just met this guy,
Oh, that's
and I don't know where the hell he's taking me.
he's got a shovel.
Yeah, he's got a shovel, and he's bringing me up to some random place.
That is probably the smart thing to do. But remember, I love the way Judd is immediately characterized. Like right away he saves Gage from a bee sting. He helps out with like a little bit of a medical emergency, and he really, the main character Lewis takes a really quick shining to him. Like as a reader, even you get the feeling that like Judd can be a really, really good friend. Like he can be a super, super deep, understanding like companion that you need in a time of need. And
even he says like he feels like he's the father he never had.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I was actually thinking about that line specifically, and I was wondering if there might be something deeper that I didn't get that is the reason that he referred to him as that. But I kind of got the feeling that he referred to him as his the dad he never had, because he wanted the readers to actually realize that like Judd's not going to take him up there and kill him, that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Like he wanted us to kind of trust Judd and realize that, I don't know, because he obviously acts a little creepy around the topic of the Pet Sematary at first. So
yeah, it was interesting, and I gotta say, it was something that I kind of even looked up a little bit. Sorry, Dross, about that, Dave.
Oh, no problem.
I kind of looked that up after I finished it, and I'm like, what the like how this power, this magic that he had written in this, I just I was so,
it was
like how much of it was him and how much of it was the power, and it was like because there was like such a gray line between it, you know,
there
almost like
is. And to touch
ahead,
on that same point, Demon, and to get a little bit more into a new theme, there is definitely a pull to the cemetery, because even later when Gage is run down by a car and Lewis is warned repeatedly, you shouldn't go bring your son up to that burial ground. Lewis feels the pull to go up there anyway, and things keep happening in his favor to draw him up there.
Yep.
So the pull is definitely there, but that brings us to another really super awesome theme, which is folklore and mythology, which I thought what King used so amazingly in this story.
Yes.
The whole background of the Micmac Indians and their burial ground, every word that King like gives you regarding that ancient history, I was so into. Like I wanted to learn more and more about it. And later when Judd is reminiscing on the story of the other human who was buried up there, Timmy Baderman, who was killed in the First World War, and his dad buried him up there and brought him back to life, and he came back different. I was on the edge of my seat that entire like story. I'm like, I want to learn about all of this. I want to know everything that's happened at this burial ground. Like, tell me, give me all the details. So that was super interesting.
And the cool thing about it is you get the feeling that, I mean, the people who've lived in this area have been living with this power for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like an unwritten rule that you don't go... It pulls to make sure that people keep going there.
Right.
And maybe it's for a pet, but there's like this unwritten rule where they fight. Always fight. You don't put a human there.
Right.
For the obvious reason that it tries clearly, whatever it is.
Right.
Whatever it is, not it, but
another book, not Stephen King's It, not Flagstaff
it is,
or Pennywise It.
It wants human bodies more than pet bodies. Clearly,
right?
Might have something to do with how it acts, but it was interesting because the story that Judd was telling about Timmy Baderman,
correct?
Even in that body, he didn't seem to do anything with it.
No.
With that freedom that he had. So I still wonder what its purpose is to come back at all. You know what I mean?
I thought he did do something with it.
Well, he walked, and then even when they found him, he was just staring at the sun, kind of.
And he made those evil remarks to him. But I think
Yeah.
the true creepiness behind Timmy Baterman's character is that it's more of the anticipation of evil. Because Timmy Baterman's walking up and down that road, and like people have heard that he's dead in a war. And Timmy Baterman kind of shambles up to some lady's porch and he's like, hey,
Yep.
you want to cut the rug with me? I want to like listen to one of your records or whatever. And she is horrified. She's like, oh my God, like this guy means me harm. He's not waving a gun in my face or anything, but she can tell like there's something not right with this kid. So I think the true horror comes from the inferred horror, like the inferred terrible things that can happen.
But I mean, Timmy Baterman, eventually his dad, like, killed him, right?
Correct.
Or killed himself.
He killed them both.
Correct.
Yeah.
In the fire, yeah.
Right, so I think that there was, like, a lot of evil going on when people weren't looking.
Yeah,
like,
for
I
sure.
think he was saying those things to his dad and being really nasty and evil and eventually just drove him insane.
For
The
sure.
thing is, like, I don't want to jump into the end too fast, but to compare, before we start talking about the end, but to compare this creature in Timmy Baterman's body versus in, as we know, Lewis's little guy.
Oh, Gage?
Gage, thank you. I mean, he is like actively and quickly murdering the hell out of people in straight up vengeance. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's, and also,
But he's doing it to the people of, like, his inner circle. Like,
kind of like
in the house.
You
Yeah.
blocked me. Well, it almost felt like he was coming back and he's like, you were one of the guys who kind of got in the way and blocked me.
Uh-huh.
I almost wonder if there was a hint there that the fire that burned down the house was maybe not the father. Like,
well, I know.
maybe there was a little bit of an because when Judd approached him, and he's like, "This time I'm gonna take you out." Whatever. He's like, "You're not gonna fuck with me now, man. I came back to fuck with you." There was more. It's almost like the story that Judd told wasn't the whole story.
Wasn't the whole story.
You know what I mean?
And there is, I did get this scene from the movie, because I was really interested in that whole segment of the story. So I watched that section of the movie, and it's interesting that you bring that up, Jeff, because in the movie, the posse that goes up to confront Old Man Baterman and Timmy, they actually set fire to the house, and they're the ones who burn it to the ground.
That's what so that's crazy because I didn't. This will be cool when we watch it, but I got the feeling that King was kind of writing a story under the story that Judd was telling Lewis.
So you think that maybe Judd lied about that demon?
I think he might have, because first of all, he knew more about what was going on. It's kind of like he was trying to scare Lewis without anteing up to the fact that he might have been
done
party
it.
to murder.
Right.
In case you don't know what Lewis is thinking at that time, so he didn't want to reveal it. But I think the posse went, and I think the posse took him out. I think they took him out, and that's why when he came back to Judd, he was really pumped about getting some sweet vengeance.
Right.
He certainly was.
Now, go ahead, Captain.
I was just going to touch a little bit more on the folklore, because earlier we were talking about the Micmac burial ground.
Yes.
And I think that there's a really, really amazing scene that Stephen King paints when Judd is bringing Lewis up to the burial ground for the first time. It's a super creepy scene, and Judd really ramps up all of this folklore. He's like, if you see St. Elmo's fire, don't follow it, which is kind of like the legend of the Will-o'-the-Wisp. If you're in the forest at night and you see a light, don't follow it because it's going to lead you astray. Kind of creepy stuff like that. And he's and as they're walking down the trail, Lewis hears this cackling and this like call, like this evil laughter, and Judd tells him, "Oh, it's just the common loons down in down south. Their echoes come up here."
Dude, I know we're gonna to be on that scene too. I don't know how you guys felt about this, because we're gonna talk about these loons and the St. Elmo's fire. I was on the goddamn seat of my pants through that entire scene when they were going up there the first time.
Yeah.
And Judd's like, "Don't look down, go here.
Yeah.
Those are just loons." And like the imagination, my imagination was running rampant, just imagining being there.
Yeah, man.
So,
And if in case our go ahead, director.
I was just gonna say, going through that, like if you put yourself in his position, that would be super, super creepy.
Right.
and then like oh yeah, oh god, that was awesome. Loons.
I've been
Go ahead,
up
Captain.
to Quebec before, and I've heard lake loons in real life, and they are super, super creepy. And in case any of our listeners are interested in what a lake loon sounds like, I've got a soundbite queued up for the common lake loon. So go ahead and sit back and take a listen, guys.
Yes. That's the director's Lake Loon impression. I'm excited to hear this, actually.
Is it playing, but we can't hear it?
I think we'll hear it.
Okay, so I did play it.
Oh, okay.
You guys didn't
I
hear
couldn't
it?
hear it.
Oh, okay. Oh, bummer. I know that my microphone picks it up because I tested it out in the microphone. So
Nice.
it will be on the audio. But
Great.
it's
This is gonna be
super
awesome.
creepy. Yeah.
So for those folks online, it's going to be interesting because I'm going to be editing this, and that's when I'm going to hear it. And I'm going to be like, oh, snap, that's creepy. But, folks, you're hearing what I'm hearing later in time at another time.
Yeah, we didn't get to hear it.
Yeah. And we're going to look it up anyway, though. I mean, the cool thing about that scene was just, first of all, the folklore. And I love how we kept bringing in the that Native American creature.
The Wendigo.
Wendigo, thank you.
Yes.
And the Wendigo, for those of you, is a Native American folklore creature that is native to the East Coast all the way through the Great Lakelands, including the Midwest,
Right.
which is pretty dope.
And the Wendigo represents. I've read quite a few horror stories on the Wendigo already because that was kind of a popular myth that people really were excited to hear about from Native Americans when they first came over to America. And there's a lot of stories written about him. Algernon Blackwood, which is a big writer, he wrote a big one. There's even like modern day games that cover the Wendigo. Until Dawn is one where they feature that. But basically, the story behind the Wendigo is that it's a spirit of the woods that represents everything that's carnal and animalistic and wild in nature. And when the Wendigo touches humanity, it basically unleashes those feelings within a human, so they make them, wild, untamable, and it's typically associated with cannibalism as well.
Yeah.
They did touch on cannibalism in this book also,
did.
something about that.
Yeah.
Because that's supposedly why the burial ground was cursed.
Right. And the legend goes like how animals are not shy about engaging in acts of cannibalism. If humans are touched by the Wendigo, they won't be shy about engaging in acts of cannibalism either. So tying that whole story and lending that to the myth behind the Micmac burial ground, was a super awesome, creepy, historic way to put in this sense of realism. Even though the character of Lewis Creed doesn't deal with that stuff on a daily basis, he moved to a new area where hundreds of years ago this kind of stuff may have happened. So it adds an element of realism to the whole, landscape.
Well, I also like how the fact that Lewis is obviously based in science. He's always talking about how where he makes a few references to scientific thought, and this is just normal and stuff like that. And he's definitely seems kind of like a skeptic, obviously. And I like that because it kind of makes you feel the same way. Because, I would say probably more people than not reading it, they know that it's a story, it's written, it's fake. So, we don't believe it because it's just a, story in a book. But, since he's starting to believe it, it's maybe I should start to believe it. And it was kind of weird because through him, I almost was just this shit's getting crazy.
The language that he used to describe So like they, Judd takes him up there. He's totally unaware, and then he buries Church, and then Judd tells him the story, and then you could see that Judd is not only scared but worried that he made a humongous mistake and was justifying it to himself. And really, we find out it was probably just kind of the pull or the power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when Church comes back, the first thing he does is pick him up and like kind of pet him out of shock. But then after that, every time he describes seeing the cat, it made me just kind of shiver in grossness. Like, especially when he goes to just like, he's so freaked out by it, he just goes, sits in the tub.
Yeah.
And it somehow gets in the bathroom and is sitting on the toilet.
Yeah.
And just like staring at him or brushed his back. And I'm just like, oh.
I know.
And then
so
they describe
disgusting.
the smell. He just does such a good job.
I know.
Describing these like weird feelings about how wrong and gross it is and how he can't keep it outside. No matter what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like implying literally that
it finds its way in
somehow,
always.
No matter what.
Yeah.
And
see, that just makes me like even more so. It makes you realize. I mean, I understand that there's kind of like this magical element, but to be completely honest, I would find it just as believable even if there was no like magical pull.
Yes.
Like the grief of dealing with the death of a child, like after his son gets hit by the car. I think would have that same effect, that same pull of, we may not be able to have him exactly how he was, but we can have him back.
Right.
And it's obviously a very selfish one because you're only kind of quelling your own, you're not really saving him. You're just bringing back like a shell of him. But I mean, I think just shows what kind of grief he was going through. The fact that he saw what happened at church, how disgusting it was, how not human it was, and yet he was still willing to go through with it.
Justify it.
Yeah. And I agree with you completely on that point, Director. Reading this book, King really does. He's really renowned for making believable characters. And as I was reading this book, there's a lot of talk of death when first Judd's wife Norma dies, and Lewis goes over to console Judd about it. Then the cat dies. There's a little bit of consolation in how Lewis's daughter Ellie is going to react to the death of the cat. That's heavily discussed throughout the book. And then when Gage dies, it's full on like emotional city with Lewis's whole family. And in my own, I'm kind of reading the book, and in my own life, I've dealt with the death of a close family member, and some of the things that are going through Lewis's head really kind of rang true to me as a reader. Like some of the things that he was thinking of, how he just felt so numb, and how certain like normal everyday mundane things like greeting people and signing the funeral book and stuff like that just seems so like insane while you're going through the act, but you just suppress those feelings and like deal with it. Like that's the kind of stuff that it made it feel like King had really been through some of those events himself, because he really did a good job of explaining how some of that feels.
For sure, yeah.
And I wonder if part of that, because I remember reading his writing book, which is also kind of an autobiography, and he had gone through the death. I remember him describing vividly the death of some of his family members, like like his mom for one, and he's just got such a good memory for tabbing certain emotions, feelings, observations to use in writing, or that come out naturally in his writing.
Yeah, it's really weird because it almost seems like, and I don't know if you guys know a little bit more about him, but it almost seems like good writers are at their heart kind of actors. They may not make good actors, but they use a lot of the same things where they put themselves in the minds of these characters. That's why they're able to make them so believable. And they're able to tap into like emotional things that happened into their life to bring such true like textures to that same kind of situation in a book, and he does it so well.
And he's also clearly, as he says, and as most really good writers are, phenomenal observers of humans.
Yeah,
just
of
watching.
Everything, not just humans, but the world and how everything works.
Just like putting a character together, you might be sitting in a coffee shop and you see some strange tick and some guy, and you'll just find it in a story, making a character unique in some strange way. Which he certainly has the ability for it. And if there was one thing that I really liked uniquely to kind of bring our topic to another spot is he did a great job making me want to punch Rachel's goddamn parents in the face all the time.
I know.
Right.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Goldman family. The father,
Yes.
oh my God. The Rachel's father, Mr. Goldman, was such a douchebag.
Yes, he was.
Going to the family on the funeral for the son and refusing to shake the father's hand is pretty much like just like spitting in their face and being like, I will never respect you. Like, I think that you are and will always be a piece of shit. Like, that's a horrible, horrible thing to do to somebody. Even, at such a low point in their life.
I completely agree that it's a horrible thing to do, but like we were talking about before, like everything can be changed through a different lens.
Right.
And if we got that same revealing chapter with him, I wonder if we'd feel differently about him.
As well.
Because he doesn't seem to be so much of maybe he was and he changed, but he eventually comes around.
He does.
And
he does.
starts realizing what a shithead he was.
Right.
And, I don't think bad people ever come around. I think good people do bad things all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes they come around. But I don't think bad people at their core ever come around.
And that's that raises another really interesting point, Brett, because even though Mr. Goldman did such a horrible thing and he could be seen as such a douchebag from that standpoint, in the end, by the end of the novel, you're kind of like, Mr. Goldman was kind of right. Like,
Yeah.
Lewis, Lewis led to the death of his daughter. Like, Lewis really did take away pretty much everything from him except for Ellie. So in the end, it's kind of like, that gut feeling that Mr. Goldman had about Lewis was kind of accurate.
Well, there's also something that I just thought of right now, and that it triggered it with what you just said. There might be something that I'm missing, but it also kind of makes you wonder if his father actually sensed something in Lewis. I wonder if there was some type of kind of pull from that magic even before they got there. Because obviously he would have a sense of that feeling from having dealt with, because he kind of hinted at the fact that Zelda may have been kind of messed up in this kind of same weird kind of magic. Like, she was all like mean and she kind of said a lot of the same things, Oz the Great and Terrible,
right,
and stuff like that.
He used that because of the story that he had from his wife about how Zelda liked it. He started to use that as kind of, he associated that Oz the Great and Terrible as
true.
Death.
Yeah,
I understand that, but I wonder if there is some type of linking thing between those deaths.
There certainly was, because Victor Pascal was certainly linked to those deaths directly. Like, he was even linked to the Pet Sematary, even though he had never been up that way. I know Lewis looked into Victor Pascal's background, and he was from like New Jersey or something. Yeah. So like, he would have never known about the Pet Sematary. But
they kind of said in the book, they said that Victor, at his moment of dying, and dying right near Lewis, Lewis being touched by the cemetery,
right?
The guardian, I guess, of the cemetery used Victor to kind of feed in to try to give a warning to Lewis,
right?
And they kind of hinted at that in there. So I don't know that death itself mattered or where they were necessarily mattered, but from the spirit realm, which might be a spirit realm, we don't know, whatever that is in this book. We don't, I call it a realm. We don't even know.
Yeah.
But whatever it was, took advantage of that soul that was departing because of Lewis, not because of anything else. So maybe, maybe there is some kind of a deep, strange connection, like it knew Lewis would eventually come there or something, but I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, man.
How about Dude, how about the ending?
Man, I hope she smells better than church.
Oh God,
Dude, he's insane.
Yeah.
I could only hope, dude. When it describes Steve,
Yeah.
he almost got pulled into it and you
Yeah.
just let him go.
right?
Yeah.
right.
And he was like, and it was crazy because he again, King never openly states this power is there. Mm-hmm. But he goes up there and you're in Steve's monologue like, what the hell? I think he killed him. And then it just, his mind's going like, I kind of want to help him. I got to help Lewis.
Right.
So it doesn't ever go into anything else but that. But he says that suddenly he just let him go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it kind of makes me feel like whether it was conscious or not, it makes me feel like this magical draw to the Pet Sematary is like almost like a metaphor for addiction.
yeah, like we talked about.
On how some people will get grabbed by addictive behavior
Yep.
easily, and they'll justify it to themselves. And other people can go and gamble and drink one night and leave it be,
Yep.
you know? And some people kind of get caught up in it, but then they can come back, you know? And I feel like that's
Yeah.
kind of like what that represented. It's like he got pulled in by it momentarily, but he fought it off and he was able to escape from it. Because he's not
and
that
he
type
never
of person.
went back to it. He was
Yeah.
terrified. He
Yeah.
moved out.
Which again brings us back to the idea of maybe that's the thing that the father was sensing
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Lewis, you
Could
know?
be.
Right.
You know, interesting about it is because we've talked about Stephen King and he's open about his battles with addiction.
Right.
And it felt to me the way that he was describing this pull and the justification
Yeah.
and the mind, it was almost like he was adding in this kind of.
Yeah.
I think then when this book was originally published in the early 90s or was it late 80s?
Early
I'm not
80s,
sure.
actually. It was
Early
It was
80s.
82 or 83, I want to say.
Okay, so I'm almost positive that it was at a point in Stephen's life, and we'll have to check on this, but he talks about it, you know, him battling with addiction, and later in life, his family basically, you know, giving him a forced intervention
Right.
as he started to deal with these things. But it was almost like addiction creeping up on him and sneaking out through his writing.
Yeah.
Before he kind of
Before
got
he
to
even
it.
knew exactly, yeah.
Maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, unless I can't remember the time frame that he talks about that intervention, but
I mean, I definitely know that for the most part, people that are dealing with addiction, even though they like won't say it's a problem, they won't admit it, they won't come to grips with it, in their head, they know like what's
kind of
going
like
on.
Lewis was
They know that
justifying
they're
it, but knew to
bullshitting and that
himself
they're
it
making
was
excuses
bullshit.
and they're giving
Right.
into it. They like know.
It was crazy. I just got that feeling like I was like, oh man, Lewis is almost. I mean, he knows it's wrong.
He does.
He's telling him, but then he's telling him what it could be,
Right.
what it could be, but maybe,
Right.
but kind of.
Exactly.
Let's just give it a go. And
'Cause
I could
that's-
always go
Yeah.
back on it.
Dude,
I
that's
could
what
always
that's
take
what
it back.
addiction does. Addiction
Yeah.
just always says, "Well, the next one's the last one," or "I can do it. I can stop anytime I want," or "I can this, I
Right.
can that. I have
I
control."
can quit
over it."
anytime I want.
I know. It's like I remember when I was trying to get back on my diet after being off of it for a while. I like every single day was like I can start it tomorrow. It's like, well, if you do that 100 days in a row, it doesn't really work.
Right. Right.
Dude, it's even crazy because it's as you're reading that part where Lewis is starting to think about actually going through it. Because first he's thinking about it, and Judd comes over and he's like, "You're thinking about it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like,
Exactly.
"Don't do
Yeah.
it. You're thinking about
Exactly.
it." And then he's like, "Okay, I'm not going to do it." But then
Right.
the next day he's like, "I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." And then suddenly he's like, "Well, I could just get him to go off to,
I know.
you know, Chicago, and then they'll never know if it turns out bad. I'll just." And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, he's telling himself that, but he's saying that he's gonna re-kill his son.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
No.
That ain't gonna happen.
No.
Right.
So
There's
you
no
know,
way.
as he's justifying.
Have you
it to
ever seen a
himself-
zombie film?
Yeah, he's
People cannot even kill zombie versions of their family.
it's like he's gonna kill this version of his son. I'm like, it's not gonna
It's not
happen.
gonna
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
as he's doing it too, he keeps trying to kind of like, well, I could go back out, and then you get to the point where he's already got the body in his car, and you're like,
I know.
oh, he's fucked now. He's going to do it.
I know.
Yeah.
Because what's the point? You can't even back out of it at that point because then what are you going to do with the body?
Right.
The body, I know.
Right. And
It's like,
King really did an amazing job of ramping up the tension repeatedly. Like every time Lewis was trying to get into the graveyard and he would hit a little hurdle or a little roadblock, it was like, okay, dude, you could literally stop right now and just go home and just stop this madness. And like Lewis even knew that. Like that was even an option in the back of his head, but he's like, no, I just gotta keep doing this. I just gotta keep doing this. And it's like, no, don't do it.
I know.
dude.
Well, the other funny thing is that like there were times because we get his inner monologue in books.
Yeah.
Like we can know his true intentions.
Right.
In a movie it's different. You can be like, was he just bullshitting? I'm not sure. But in the book, there were times where he legitimately was dead set on, okay, that's the clue that I needed. I'm not going through with this. Mm-hmm. And then like 3 pages later, he's like, all right, I'm going through with this.
Yep.
Man.
Yeah, man, definitely.
And that's what I thought was so cool because
Dude.
I just loved seeing the flip-flop because it's something that I think almost anybody can relate to.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
It's that justification to yourself that it's not going to be that bad. I can do this.
Right.
It's not, I'm not being a terrible person.
Right.
I think we're at about 55 minutes.
Cool.
We are.
But we started late, so we got less. So let's take a quick break. I need a refill.
I do too.
And let's do another episode.
All right,
And
we'll
so
come back
that's
for
kind
part
of
two.
The part 2. I think it'll be fun.
Awesome.
All right, folks. With that, cheers.
Charles.
Cheers.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Lit Literature. If you liked us, please check out our social media at Lit Literature 1 at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't hesitate to join in on the conversation. We appreciate the conversation, the questions, book recommendations, anything of that sort. Join in right on the social media websites. And don't forget to check us out at our website, litliterature.com, and our upcoming projects, though there aren't many now besides Lit Literature, you can find at lyket.net, Lyket. We do have a Patreon account, but if you truly want to support us, please like and share. Cheers.